everyone, welcome or welcome back. My name is Yuna and I am being maybe a little too ambitious and trying to film my second reading vlog for the month. I decided I wanted to do a second reading vlog this month because I have a couple of fun book-related activities that I'm going to be doing that I wanted to take you along for, and also the books that I'm going to be reading for this vlog are both the same genre, so I was like, it's themed. I think it makes sense. So the books that I'll be reading are The Reformatory by Tananarive Due and Bateater and Other Names for Corazang by Kylie Lee Baker. One of the book-related activities that I mentioned that I'm going to be doing is going to bookcon later this month, which is going to be in New York. I hadn't originally planned to go to bookcon, but my friend got me tickets as a surprise for my birthday. And we ended up doing that before sort of all the controversies around bookcon and Repop came out. So we're gonna go check it out and see how it is. And I have to say that the ticketing and panel reservation process was absolutely wild. It was such a mess, so I'm not sure if the con is going to be well organized or not, but it'll be my first time going to BookCon. But there are a few authors that I'm really excited to see and some panels that sound interesting, so I am excited to go. And I managed somehow, I don't know how I managed to do this, but I got a book signing for Tananarive Due and I'm going to a panel with Kylie Lee Baker. So I want to try to read both of these books before I go to the con so that I can interact with them having read their books. I'm probably also going to insert some footage of this fun used bookstore that I went to. I already talked about it, I think, in my April TBR, so that's already happened, but I have footage from that I just took for fun, so I'll include that so you guys can see. And yeah, I will take you along for BookCon. Hopefully it's fun. I'll show you some of the stuff that I see there, and obviously I will be giving reading updates for these two books and my final thoughts later on. I think I am going to start with Bateater and Other Names for Corazang, and then I will do The Reformatory. I've heard pretty much only good things about these books, so I have unfortunately high expectations, which I feel like it's always unfair to go into a book with expectations, but I don't really know what type of horror Bateater and Other Names for Corazang is. I don't know if it's body horror, if it's psychological thriller, like what it is. This one I feel like is more historical fiction horror, and I've heard that it is pretty emotional and difficult to read. So fun fact, it took me a while to get interested in horror books because I'm actually really awful with watching horror genre media, like TV shows or movies. I get jump scared from a feather falling, so whenever I watch horror movies, I'm extremely reactive and it's kind of embarrassing. So half the time if I'm watching a horror movie or something, I'm watching it like turned away out of the corner of my eye, and I still end up like screaming and jumping. So it took me a while to build up the courage to pick up horror books, and in the last year I've read a lot more of them and I'm really enjoying them. And I feel like for the most part it's not like I'm getting jump scared when I'm reading a horror book, it's more unsettling or disturbing. So I am definitely looking forward to these two. I've read horror books that I've really enjoyed, but I don't think I've had one that I've given 5 stars yet. So I got lucky with my romantasy reading vlog. Maybe I'll get lucky again. I'm gonna get started with Bateater and Other Names, like I said, and it's not a super long book. It's a little under 300 pages, but I think I will still come in to do a quarter-way check-in with you guys. So yeah, I'll get started on this and I will come back with my thoughts in a bit. Bye.
It's gonna be painful.
Yeah.
$2.50.
Oh. I'm just obsessed.
Yeah. The journals are so fun. Well, it looks like a ledger or something.
Yeah, it's like someone's like financial records.
Yay! Ah!
I've never seen.
Wow. 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 Where?
I've never seen this.
The dish.
So this is yujacha, and it's a really popular Korean tea. It's made from a citrus called yuja, and it's kind of like a, if you think of like lemon honey tea, it's like that. Usually you drink it in the winter. You mix it with hot water, and it's really soothing and comforting and has a bunch of vitamins. But I also like to drink it not hot. I like it cold. I'll mix it with cold water, and I think it's just like so refreshing and bright, and it just feels like sunshine in my mouth. So it's one of my favorite teas. I like it hot and I like it cold. I don't know if you can see, but it's my favorite little straw because it looks like Lucy. So I'm about halfway through Bateater and Other Names for Corazang, so I am popping on to give you my halfway update. It feels weird to say that I'm having a great time because it is a pretty gross and disturbing book, but I'm having a great time. I went into this not knowing exactly what kind of horror I was going to end up reading about, and so far there are actually multiple different kinds of horror. We have supernatural horror, we have body horror, gory horror. I'm actually not well versed on genres or subgenres of horror. I don't think that I've read horror for long enough or widely enough to really know, but basically there's supernatural elements like ghosts and hauntings, and there are also elements of just like gory body horror. I don't know what to call it. Crime horror, body horror, violence horror, whatever would fit under that umbrella. So spoiler-free thoughts for the first half. Even though this is the spoiler-free section, I just want to make sure you know that I am going to talk about some things that happen in the book, but generally for me, if it can be read on the dust jacket or if it's included on the back as part of the description of the book, I don't really consider that a spoiler. And just so you know, because I know there's some people who don't want to know literally anything about a book, in which case I don't know why you'd be on someone's channel listening to book reviews, because obviously you're going to be learning something about the book. So I'm just going to assume that you are okay with me talking about some of the things that happen that are pretty early on. And again, that you could read if you were just reading the summary of the book. The story follows, not surprisingly, a girl named Corazang. She's a young woman in her early 20s, and we start off the book with her and her sister Delilah. Basically, the very first thing that happens in this book, Cora and Delilah are in a subway station in New York, and a masked man comes and pushes Delilah in front of an oncoming train, calls her Bateater, and in an act of really horrific racial violence, he pushes her in front of the car and she dies. After Delilah's death, Cora becomes a crime scene cleaner, so she goes in with her co-workers Harvey and Yifei after like a murder has been found or some violent crime has been reported. After the body has been removed, after the police have done whatever they need to do, they go in and clean all the blood and gore and brains and guts. This book is set during the peak years of COVID, and as she is working at these crime scenes, she and her coworkers begin to notice a trend, which is that all of these victims of very violent murders are East Asian women, and there also seems to be a sort of calling card that the killer is leaving, which is bats. It's kind of crazy to think, but I guess it's been enough years since the onset of COVID that maybe some of the readers or people watching this video might be young enough that you don't really remember very well when COVID began. But when COVID started, there was a lot of racial hatred against East Asians. They were blamed for starting and spreading COVID. They were called bat eaters because there was a suspicion that someone in China had eaten a bat, and that was the genesis of COVID. But yes, they begin to notice this trend that East Asian women are being killed and that the killer is leaving bats in some form or shape as a calling card. At the same time that this is happening, Cora also begins to suspect that she is being haunted by the ghost of her sister. In some areas of Chinese belief, there is this concept of a hungry ghost, which basically is a ghost of a past loved one or family member who become aggressive or haunt you because you haven't given them enough respect or remembrance after their passing. So Cora is dealing with these killings, she's dealing with the passing of her sister, this possible haunting, she's dealing with a lot of internal strife, and on top of that, she also seems to have different levels of either social anxiety or just general anxiety or maybe some OCD. She's very particular about germs or just the way things are done, and obviously in the time of COVID and in working as a crime scene cleaner, that's something that she really has to grapple with. I think that the horror aspects so far are being done really well. I think that the gross parts are really gross, and the descriptions of bodies and death and body parts is really unsettling. I'll probably read you a couple passages in the spoilers. Excuse me. I'll probably read you a couple of those passages in the spoilers section. The supernatural elements and the descriptions of the ghosts have also been really uncomfortable and eerie. I will say that it's interesting. I'm a huge one when it comes to horror movies. I will watch a horror movie backwards through a mirror, half covering my face, because I'm really jumpy. I think that the sounds and visual aspects of horror movies, especially jump scares, just really mess me up. I get so scared so easily and I'll have nightmares for weeks on end. On the other hand, I don't often actually get scared reading horror books. I don't know if this says something negative about my imagination or my ability to put myself into a world of a book, but I find that unlike horror movies, horror books don't tend to scare me very often, or they don't give me a visceral reaction. I know people who read horror books and can't sleep at night, are genuinely afraid, they're really unsettled, and I find that even if I appreciate how well done a horror book is, I'm not necessarily someone who's going to lose any sleep over it. But all that said, I do think that the supernatural elements are being done really well so far in this book. Something else that I'm really appreciating about this book is that it does really explore some very sensitive and poignant and introspective topics. I think writing this from the point of view of an East Asian woman during COVID times, it gives you a lot of room to explore things like isolation, a lack of community, search for community and connection. I mean, these are things that people were going through whether or not they were East Asian during COVID, but I think it's a really interesting and powerful way to highlight how that was even heightened as someone who is East Asian and being met with a lot of suspicion and even blame and hatred. Cora is someone who is very much struggling to find a sense of self, to discover what her hopes and dreams and desires are. She is feeling, again, very isolated. She is feeling a lot of grief. She doesn't feel like she has community, whether that's friends or family. I think the closest that Cora really has to a community would be her two co-workers, Harvey and Yifei, who are actually kind of hilarious. I love their interactions with each other and with Cora. They're both kind of strange and quirky and could be considered outcasts for different reasons. She also does have some family, but I don't think she feels particularly close to or seen by any of them. I'll wrap up the spoiler-free section by saying I am very much hooked on this book. I am really intrigued to see where the storylines go, both with the haunting aspect and with these crimes that are sort of piling up. The supernatural elements are also really interesting because I don't know yet if they are actually real ghosts, if she is actually being haunted, or if this is just a sign of her having some sort of mental breakdown, or if this is just an externalized experience of her stress and isolation. I'm not really sure, so we'll see, I'm assuming, as we go on, or maybe it's something that remains ambiguous. Alright, now for the spoiler section. I'm going to read you the scene where Delilah gets pushed in front of the train by the man. The man appears in a flash of a black hoodie and blue surgical mask. He says 2 words, and even though the train is rushing closer, a roaring wave about to knock them off their feet, those 2 words are perfectly clear, sharp as if carved into Cora's skin. Bateater. Delilah stumbles over the yellow line, ankle twisting, and when she crashes down, there's no ground to meet her, just a yawning chasm of the train tracks. The first car hits her face. Cora steps closer, and it almost looks like Delilah is leaning over the edge, peering over the lip of the platform. But Delilah ends just above her shoulders. Her throat is a jagged line, torn flaps of skin and sharp bone, and the pulsing O of her open trachea. Blood runs unstopped from her throat, swirling together with the rainwater of the rotting train station, and soon the whole platform is bleeding, weeping red water into the crack between the platform and train, feeding the darkness. Cora is screaming, a raw sound that begins somewhere deep inside her ribcage and tears its way up her throat and becomes a hurricane, a knife-sharp cry, the last sound that many women ever make. Horrifying, absolutely horrifying, and there continue to be a lot of really uncomfortable descriptions of broken, abused, battered, ripped apart, mutilated bodies of women. The crime scenes are really, really awful, and another aspect of it that I absolutely hate is the bats. I said that the serial killer, keeps leaving bats at these scenes, and the poor bats are also mutilated, or they're like, it's not just like a card with a picture of a bat. I mean actual bats. I love bats, I love animals, and the descriptions of the abuse done to them also really, really, really disgusted me. It makes me sick, absolutely disgusting. One of the quickest ways to upset me is violence against animals. In terms of the ghost, Cora has seen a ghost multiple times. It's described in a super creepy way. It has this really thin needle neck, and it's so hungry, and it has to force food through this tiny little neck. She has told Harvey and Nife, she's finally confessed to them that she suspects that she's being haunted, and I was so relieved that the 2 of them actually very readily believed her. Yeah, they were very quick to believe her and agreed to help her in what ways they can. And I think that despite their eccentricities, they are both honestly really supportive of Cora and are going to, I hope, try their best to help her both with the serial killer case and with this ghost of her sister. I really hope that she's able to move past her own fears and her own, limitations that she's putting on herself and make meaningful connections with these 2 people, because I don't know, I think that they care about her, and even though they're all flawed and kind of funky, I think that they could make a really good community for each other. So yeah, I'm hoping that she's able to reach out and be vulnerable and talk to these 2 people. I think that's it for any specific spoilers that I have for this midway update. This book so far has been really easy to get through, and I don't mean in terms of content, because the content is very heavy and disturbing, but the writing style itself is very easy to read. So I'm going to keep reading and listening to the audiobook, and once I have finished, I will be back to give you my final thoughts.
Hi, handsome. Hello. Oh, hi. He's a good boy.
I need to talk to Kylie Lee Baker, but I'll leave that for the spoiler section. So I just finished this book earlier today, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to let my thoughts kind of marinate. Hopefully what I have to say doesn't come out too jumbled and has some sense of coherence to it, but I don't know. I think this was an excellent horror book. I would say that it is up there in my maybe top 3 horror reads. This book infuriated me at points. This book made me laugh really unexpectedly at other points. This book made me both hate people and also have some sense of hope in the idea of community. It also made me cringe. It made me doubt myself. Don't know that there's a whole lot I can say spoiler free, but I will do a quick spoiler free section. I think that this is a really well done horror book that balances horror elements like body horror or supernatural horror with some of the real world horrors that we have to deal with every day, like racial violence. It does all of that really well and integrates it with some really poignant exploration of things like what it means to try to find yourself as an individual after losing or, parting ways with someone that you are codependent with. What grief looks like when you lose someone who you had a complicated relationship, forgiveness, identity, isolation, community, all the things I said. If you're not afraid of a little bit of blood and gore, then I would highly recommend this book. Now for the spoiler section. Spoilers. Be warned. Yo, what the hell? I can't believe what Kylie Lee Baker did to Harvey and Yifei. When I was reading this book and I got to the scenes with the two of them, my jaw literally dropped. I was so mad. I was so upset. Okay, let me collect myself and wind it back just a little bit. Even though they're scared and have their reservations, Harvey and Yifei continue to be real ones for Cora and continue to try to help her with dealing with her sister's ghost and dealing with whoever the serial killer is. And while doing that, both of them die. I cannot believe. I must have looked a fool in my last check-in saying that I hope the 3 of them create a good little community for themselves and become really close friends. These were the only 2 people that Cora might have called friends, and they were just snuffed out, murdered. I want justice for Harvey and I want justice for Yifei. And like I said, they die horribly. Yifei and Cora find Harvey. I believe he's been stuffed into like an industrial laundry machine, and they just like see his face in the bloody water against the laundry machine door, and they can't get the door open because it's running, and oh my god, I was so upset. I really liked Harvey. And Yifei is trying to drive Cora somewhere, and they're both kind of panicked, and they get into a car accident. And the way that Yifei is described, I'm gonna read it to you. If you don't want to hear something pretty gory, skip ahead a little bit. Yifei is crushed on her left side, pressed against the trunk of an oak tree. The car has folded around the tree, glass shattering to accommodate it, side airbag decimated. Yifei only has the right side of her face intact, the other half a slop of blood and shattered skull and eyeball jelly, jaw popped open, eye unseeing. Cora has seen so much brain matter at work, she recognizes the grayish-pink mush oozing down the shattered windshield, crevices full of blood. One aspect of the book that I think I was really surprised by was the fact that the ghosts are actually real. The supernatural hauntings isn't just a reflection of a mental breakdown or externalized stress from Cora. They are actually there. The ghost actually violently harms multiple people. R.I.P. Yifei's roommates. The ghost actually like rips their heads off, I think, and eats them. So that was a very fun surprise for me. I think there was something really refreshing about that too, because Cora is someone who lives a lot in her head. If you know anyone or are someone who struggles with things like anxiety or OCD, then you understand probably better than I do how much you are stuck in your own head, in the cycle of your own thoughts. So for her to say, I think I'm being haunted, I don't know if I'm going crazy, and to just have people like her coworkers or her aunt just believe her, I think that was something really refreshing. I think a lot of the times when you read stories like this, there's a lot of tension between people not believing them. Are they real? Are they not real? Are they crazy? And so, I don't know, I really enjoyed that. I think that aside from Harvey and Yifei's awful, horrific deaths, the worst part of this book for me, worst as in best, right, for a horror book, the worst parts were actually around the serial killer, the bateater serial killer. During her investigations and as she's trying to track down who she thinks is her sister's killer, Cora discovers the really horrifying truth that the killer, this person who has been going around killing East Asian girls, isn't actually one person, but it's a whole network of people. She comes across this sort of chat room where all of these really horrific people are gathering to talk about how much they hate East Asians, how they're bat eaters, how they're at fault for COVID, how they should all die. Whoever is the first person to kill one of these women and leave this bat calling card, they inspire a bunch of copycats. And so Cora is just like, actually, there are hundreds of people who are doing this, and there's not just one person that I can kill or bring to justice to avenge my sister and to avenge all of these women who have been brutally murdered. It's one of those books in which, yeah, the ghosts are scary, the supernatural elements are really creepy, but what's even more horrifying is that it makes you think about some of the lowest lows in humanity. I think it's one of the elements of living in a post-Trump society does to you is it really makes you grapple with the fact that there are people everywhere, people that you might have grown up with, people you might have trusted, people you may have loved and called friends, your coworker, the person serving you coffee, the police officer that just pulling you over. There are people everywhere who are not just willing to, but happy to consider you less than, to consider you someone who doesn't deserve integrity or dignity or justice or rights. Some of these people are cheering for your demise or your death or your suffering. That's the real horror, Finally, I'll say another aspect of this book that I thought was really intriguing and complicated was Cora's relationship with her sister Delilah. There is a lot of love between the two of them, but there is also a lot of resentment and this unhealthy codependency. There's a line somewhere in the book where Cora is saying, I might be a little off because I can't remember exactly what she said, but she was more or less saying that she doesn't have room, or she didn't have room for religion or a god in her life because her god was Delilah, because she worshipped her sister so much. When she loses Delilah at the beginning of this book, Cora is just so unanchored and she doesn't know what to do with herself. She doesn't know who she is without the context of her sister. Towards the end of the book, it's really interesting because the ghost that's been haunting Cora, who Cora assumed was Delilah, we actually find out that it's not even Delilah, it's one of the women who was murdered, whose crime scenes Cora cleaned up. At the end of the book, after everything has happened, it seems like Cora is kind of trying to get her feet under her, trying to find herself and move on and carve out a life for herself beyond her sister, and I thought that was really hopeful. But Kylie Lee Baker did something kind of sneaky because she ended the book with what felt kind of like a post-credit scene. Cora is sitting in her room and she has an orange, I believe it is, and she holds out the orange, and in the very last scene of the book, a hand reaches out, presumably Delilah's ghost hand is reaching out, and so it implies that Cora has somehow managed to maintain contact with her sister, or that she's able to communicate with her sister in some way, and I don't know exactly how I feel about that. Again, I just finished this book today, so I have to think about it a bit more. I'm not yet entirely positive what the intent was behind making the twist and revealing that the ghost who has been haunting / kind of guiding Cora wasn't even Delilah, that it was someone else. I'm not entirely sure, what the message of that is, so I have to sit and think about that. But also with the ending, part of it, I guess if you look at it through one lens, it could be kind of heartwarming that Cora has been able to maintain contact with a sister that was wrenched from her so violently. But on the other hand, it feels like Cora isn't actually moving forward, or that she still has this kind of anchor or codependency with her sister even in death. I'm not sure. I have to think about how I feel about it, but I love that. I love an ambiguous ending like that where you have to think and it's not entirely clear what is going on or what it means or where the character is headed. So while I'm sitting here saying I don't really know what X, Y, or Z means or what the message is, that's not a complaint. I love having something to think about after I finish the book. I'll end the spoiler section there and just say that I really, really enjoyed this book. I think it had multiple moving parts and different messages and themes that were integrated really well. I don't think that at any point it felt really clunky, even though it's a pretty short book trying to cover a lot of material. I had a really great time. It was easy to get through, easy to read, again, even despite the heavy topics. I think if you're looking for a horror book that does horror really well but also has a very human heart and will leave you with a lot to think about, then I would recommend Bateater. As always, I reserve the right to change my mind and adjust my ratings, but for now, coming fresh off of finishing this book, I would give it 4 stars. I think, 4 stars. Maybe even 4.5, but right now I'll settle for 4 stars. Loved it, had a really great time. I'm really excited to go to the horror panel at BookCon where Kylie Lee Baker is going to be speaking. I'm also pretty sure she has a new book that has dropped or is dropping called Japanese Gothic, so I would love to pick that up. That's all for Bateater. I'm going to move on now to the Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This one's a bit chunkier. I think it's almost 600 pages. I'm not positive, but it's definitely a longer book. I was originally hoping to have it finished by the time that I went to bookcon because I have a signing with Tananarive Due, so I wanted to kind of gush about her book to her. But I think I'll probably only be like halfway through by the time I get to bookcon, but that's okay. I'm not positive that I'm gonna have time to come in and do another check-in before I go to bookcon, so it'll probably be after, at which point I might already be past the halfway point. So I might be coming in for like a 3/4 way check-in or something like that. We'll play it by ear, we'll see what happens. I'm so happy we started this vlog off really strong with Bateater, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I also very much love the Reformatory, but we will find out when I come back for my check-in in probably a few days or right after bookcon.
Easy to find in the crowd.
That's kind of why I bought it.
I mean,
Also, I can brag.
Booktown.
Get the $200 tapestry? Yes. No? Yes. Yeah. Oh my god. I like low-key. They kind of look like they've been flayed. Yes. Am I allowed, are you allowed to pick it up? Okay. I'm not gonna do it. No. No.
like a mini like ERP market.
Oh. Ooh, it turns! Oh my god! Is that it? It just turns? Oh my god! Stop! Fuck me! I got my son! This is my son! Oh my god! Look at him! Oh! I want this hippo cat like more than I've wanted anything in my life. He's so cute.
my 75% 3/4 way check-in for the Reformatory by Tananarive Due, and I just want to know what Kylie Lee Baker and Tananarive Due have against me. I'll save specifics for the spoiler section, but I just read a part of this book that I found so upsetting. As I suspected, I wasn't ready to finish this book before BookCon, and I know that I've included footage of me at BookCon and kind of showed you what it was like, but if any of you are interested in hearing some more specific thoughts on what the experience was like and just generally how I feel about BookCon, I will include that in the end of the video, probably just at the end after I have actually reviewed this book, my final thoughts on this book. I will also let you know just what I think about BookCon. But back to this book. I can't believe that Tananarive Due smiled in my face when I told her that I was about halfway through and I was really enjoying the book, and she didn't. She didn't in any way, shape, or form warn me of the absolute heartache and just emotional massacre that was to come. Obviously that's a joke, but I wasn't ready. I can't even remember at this point if I gave a summary of this book in the intro, so I'm just gonna do it now. This book follows two siblings who are the main protagonists of the book. We have Robbie, who is a 12-year-old black boy, and his older sister Gloria in Florida in the 1950s. At the beginning of this book, Robbie and Gloria are minding their own business and walking, I think they're walking to school, and this white boy named Lyle approaches them, and Lyle is the son of this important man in town. He begins to make advances on Gloria, and Robbie kicks him for the unforgivable sin of being a little black boy who would dare to kick a white boy. Robbie is sentenced to 6 months at the reformatory school. Robbie ends up going to the reformatory school, and he has the special talent for seeing haints or ghosts. And while he is at the reformatory school, he starts to see these haints, and he's just trying to keep his head low and not catch anyone's eye so he can get out of the reformatory school as soon as possible, and he's just trying to survive this place. In the meantime, his sister Gloria is doing truly everything she can think of to try to get Robbie out of this school. She's trying to find lawyers, she is talking to judges, like she's doing everything she can to try and get her little brother out. She knows it's not a good place. This school has a history of abusing boys, and often when boys try to run away, they don't just get caught and punished. They disappear, they die mysteriously, or they die of heat stroke from trying to run away. But the truth is, the reformatory school is run by this demon of a man who relishes in abusing these boys and calls it justice. He calls it doing God's work. All of that nonsense that just makes my blood start to boil just talking about it. But yeah, so we are basically following these two characters, Gloria and Robbie. And I will say that I knew about Robbie's part in the book, but I had no idea that Gloria had such a big part, that she is also a main character and that she also has powers. I'm in love with these two siblings and I'm rooting for them so hard. I was actually surprised because, like I said, I didn't realize that Gloria would have such a big part in the book. And while I personally think that Robbie's part of the story, you know, the haints and the reformatory school and all the things that are going on there, is probably a bit more high octane or maybe more interesting for most people to read, I think character-wise, I'm actually so drawn to and attached to Gloria. I just love her fire and her inability to keep her mouth shut in a situation where everyone is telling her you have to keep your head low, you have to be quiet, you are not going to help Robbie this way. She sees injustice, she sees the lies, she sees bigotry, she sees hypocrisy, and she just has to say something. And I think that Gloria's sense of justice and how much she loves her little brother and the lengths that she is willing to go to get him out of there, I don't know, I want to protect her. I love her so much. Of course, that's not to say I don't love Robbie. I also love Robbie, and I am very, 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 very afraid for him. He gets to school and he is able to make two friends, Redbone and Blue, and they are kind of showing him the ropes, and he's just trying to keep his head down. But there's just such a sense of dread and tension and impending trouble and just this ever-present sense that there is harm around the corner for Robbie. And actually, I think also what's done really well is that even though Robbie is maybe more obviously in a place of danger, Gloria is also experiencing many of the same things in terms of danger and tension. No specific spoilers, but there's a scene where she is having a very tense interaction with police, and it just made me think, God, like, she's not even in the reformatory school, but she makes one wrong move, she looks at someone wrong, and she could end up dead just as easily as Robbie. There is really no safe place for a black person. There is no place for a little black girl and a little black boy to just be little children where they don't have to worry about racism, where they don't have to worry about bigotry, about violence, about corrupt systems, whether they are in a reformatory school or just minding their own business, walking to school, whether they are home, it doesn't matter. No system is safe for them. And I would simply not argue with anyone who says that not much has changed since then. Sorry, that was a little bit of a rant, but basically I am very much loving this book. I am feeling at the edge of my seat and so tense and nervous and afraid. The prose is more straightforward. It's not particularly poetic or extravagantly descriptive or anything like that, but it's easy to read, and I think Tenani just does a really good job of writing impactful sentences even without the extra fluff or decoration. There's just a lot of punch to certain lines, and she's getting me good. Now for the spoiler section. Spoilers, be warned. Spoilers. I have to start by saying I'm so upset by what happened to Redbone. I mentioned that Robbie, once he got to the reformatory, was able to make two friends, Redbone and Blue. So far through the course of the book, a bunch of things have happened with those two characters. As I said, Robbie is able to see haints really well. Other people can see haints. Other children have seen ghosts at the reformatory, but Robbie is particularly good at spotting them, and he can see them really clearly. His ability has caught the eye of Mr. Haddock, who is he the headmaster? He's the top guy basically at the reformatory, and he is a horrific, disgusting, vile man who I hope by the end of this book has met a horrific death. He's just the most vile kind of man. He has put so many boys who have come through this school through so many different types of unimaginable horrors and tortures, whether that is beatings, like horrific beatings, sexual abuse. There's a shed that he takes boys to that has a bloody mattress and chains where he takes them to rape them. He was responsible for locking up a group of boys in this building and then burning them alive. And we find out that he takes a special interest in Robbie's ability to see these ghosts because he wants to essentially use Robbie to catch and kind of kill these ghosts, their spirits, and capture them. Through the course of these events, we find out that Blue is actually not alive. He is a haint. He was one of the boys that died in the burning of that building, and he's just stuck around. So Blue's a ghost, and Haddock is forcing Robbie to catch the ghosts of these boys that Haddock himself has killed, and he is kind of using Redbone as leverage. He's basically saying to Robbie that if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'm going to take Redbone, I'm going to hurt Redbone. Your only friend that you have in this place that is hell on earth, I will hurt him if you don't do what I say. Let me see if I can explain this. So basically, Haddock has told Robbie, you have to catch a ghost, you have to catch a haint, or I'm going to hurt your friend Redbone. Robbie tried, but he fails to catch a ghost, and so he and Redbone are in a scenario where they could give up Blue, right? They could say, actually, we can catch this ghost and give Blue to Haddock in order to save Redbone so that Redbone doesn't have to go through whatever torture Haddock has in plan for him. Robbie almost does that. He almost chooses to give up Blue, but at the last second, Redbone says, don't do it. I'm fine. I trust you. I know you're going to be able to catch another ghost. Oh, I'm going to cry. He basically says, don't worry, I'm not scared, I trust you, I know you're going to be able to catch a haint. And so he goes off to accept whatever punishment they have in store for him, and I'm just going to read it to you. This is just as Robbie is about to give up Blue to Mr. Boone, who is one of the workers, one of the employees at the school who is part of keeping the boys in line and essentially torturing the boys. Boone wrenched Redbone's arm, pulling him backward, and Redbone cried out, but he never looked away from Robert. Shh, Redbone said. Shut up, Robert, I'm not scared. It was a lie, and it was not a lie, because although fear had pounded a fever into Redbone's skin, his eyes were not afraid. He even smiled a little. It's okay, you'll get one tomorrow, I know it. Redbone knew Boone was taking him to the funhouse, the box, or maybe somewhere worse, but his eyes were unblinking on Robert's, telling him not to be afraid, that he shouldn't tell on Blue or say anything that could mean his mama might get caught in Haddock's jar. Robert kept staring to be sure, and Redbone nodded his head. It's okay, Redbone said again. And then later, the last line in this chapter, he called for Blue all night in bed, whispering in the dark, but Blue did not come to him. Robert never saw Redbone again. First Harvey and Yifei and Bateater, and now Redbone in this book. I don't understand. Why did these authors keep giving these characters a chance for community and support in these horrible situations and then killing them? I get it, it's really effective. Obviously, I've had a reaction to both of those scenarios, but I'm just, I'm so upset. And the fact that Redbone is also just a boy, like, he's just a little teenager. And the fact that this little kid is just trying to be brave and protect his friends in this god-awful place, and it leads to him dying this awful death. Ugh. Hate it. And I think that part of what makes it, doubly upsetting is just knowing that this kind of scenario, this sort of thing, probably happened in real life. I can very easily see a scenario in which, little black children were forced, scenarios in which little black children were forced to give up their friends or to choose to bear unbearable pain and harm in order to protect the little kids around them. And, just thinking about that. Yeek! Yeah. Tananarive, you got me. Alright, I'm gonna pull myself together to talk about some other aspects of this book, including Gloria. Like I mentioned, she has a much bigger role in this book than I knew to expect, and one of the things I was really pleasantly surprised by is the fact that she also has gifts. She has these powers. Unlike Robbie, who can see hates, she has some sort of clairvoyance. She is able to sense things that are going to happen, or she gets a sense of things that are happening in other places, even if she's not there or doesn't actually have any awareness of the events. As she is traveling around and contacting people and trying to find a way to get Robbie out of the school, she has come across multiple figures who are actual real-life historical figures from US history. There are black people who met violence in their lives, and one of them was a civil rights activist who was actually assassinated. His home was bombed and he died. And obviously at the point that she meets him in this book, it's before these events, but when she meets them, she gets a sense that something awful is going to happen to these people. With the man who is assassinated, I think she smells smoke or dust, or she knows that there's going to be some sort of explosion. I'll need to take some time and think about exactly what Tananarive was trying to do with giving Gloria this power. Like, what's the commentary she's trying to make, if any? What does this mean, or what is the observation she's making about black people and black relationships and black history? I'm also really enjoying the diversity of black people in this story in terms of their social standings, in terms of how they're interacting with Gloria or with Robbie, or even the different kinds of roles they have in the abuse that these boys are experiencing. We have people like Miss Lottie, who is the unofficial guardian for Robbie and Gloria, who is ride or die. She is ready to try and do whatever she has to do to work with Gloria to get Robbie out of that school. She is an old lady, but she is so incredible, and I'm very worried about her. I'm very afraid that she is not going to make it to the end of this book alive, because she's already experiencing a bunch of health things. But then there are other black people, like black people who are working at the reformatory and being a part of the abuse that is being inflicted on these boys. Then we also have characters like Miss Hamilton, who is a band director or band teacher at the reformatory school, who sees the abuse that's happening and obviously doesn't agree with it and wants to protect the boys, but is in many ways sort of complicit. Like, she hasn't actually done anything to stop it. She just disapproves and does what she can to subtly support the boys, but she's complicit. I really appreciate that Tananarive has this very nuanced portrayal of black people and the way that they navigated the systems of abuse that they were part of. I think that's really important and adds a lot of layers and textures to the story. I'll end the spoiler section there and say that this book is really difficult to read, especially knowing that the reformatory school in this book is based on a real school that existed. It's called the Dozier School for Boys, where a lot of horrific abuse happened. There was sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, just all types of harm happened to the boys at that school. And the story is based on what happened there, so obviously it's going to be really heavy material. It's going to be really difficult to read, knowing that these children are treated just so brutally. I appreciate that Tananarive is showing us the many nuanced ways that black people reacted to or interacted with or were complicit with or fought against the systems of harm. Black people in this book, as in life, are not a monolith, but none of them have come out completely unharmed or untouched by racism and violence. I'm at a point in the book that is very high tension. There's a lot going on. I think we're rapidly approaching what I suspect is going to be the climax of this book, so I will finish it probably today or tomorrow, and I will come back and give my final thoughts. I am so scared. I really just need Gloria and I need Robbie to be safe, and it's also, oh god, I'm gonna cry again. It's also so scary because, again, knowing history and knowing where we're at even today in the year 2026, I just, even if Gloria and Robbie are able to escape the school or able to escape their town or whatever it may be, there's so much ahead of them that they're going to have to navigate, and life is just not going to be easy for them. But even so, they deserve life. They deserve a chance to live. So I am just really praying that Tananarive doesn't hurt me any further, and that the two of them are able to reunite and get Robbie out of that school. So I'm scared. I don't know what's gonna happen. Let me finish the book and I will come back and give you my thoughts. Okay, I've officially finished the reformatory and I'm here to give my final thoughts. I have to apologize if I keep sniffling or sneezing or if I sound super nasally. My allergies are acting out of line. I can barely breathe. My eyes are so puffy and itchy. I'm so congested. So apologies if I'm just super unpleasant to listen to right now, but I'm just gonna try to barrel through it and do the end of this reading vlog. And apologies if I just keep repeating myself or if I just sound like I'm out of it. If you have really bad seasonal allergies, you'll know, but it just puts me in such a brain fog. Like, I just can't think straight when my allergies are acting up this badly, but I'm gonna try my best. Give me some grace if I sound like a fool. So I finished the reformatory and I think that this was such a beautiful, awful, horrific, well thought out and impactful story. This is one of those books where I would definitely like to take some time to sit down and think about it and maybe watch some interviews of January talking about the book and the characters, because I just feel like each of the characters were meant to represent something, or each of them provided some sort of message. And I would love to hear from Tananarive herself, sort of what her thought process was in putting together this cast of characters and why she sort of structured it the way she did. I don't know if such an interview exists out there, but I'm gonna look. I continued to be really riveted by the plot. It is a very difficult, harrowing, disgusting read because it is based on some of the most horrific parts of American history. We'll do a quick spoiler-free section, and I'll say that I thought this book was incredibly powerful and very intentionally put together. If you're someone who needs to check trigger warnings, content warnings, definitely do that, because there's a bunch of stuff that happens in here that is just incredibly uncomfortable to engage with. I thought that both Robbie and his sister Gloria's storylines were equally intriguing, and I loved both of them so much. I think that, you know, there's obviously the excitement of Robbie's storyline because he's at the reformatory, he's engaging with these ghosts, there's all this stuff happening, but with Gloria, there might have been fewer supernatural elements happening in her storyline, but there were so many interpersonal things going on and so many dynamics happening with different levels of bureaucracy or government or police, and I think that was really engaging for me to read for her. One of the other standout strengths of this book to me were the antagonists. So there's definitely a main antagonist. There's the big bad, there's the end game boss that exists in this book, but along the way you meet so many people who are in different complicated and nuanced ways involved in the system. They either contribute to the system, are complicit in the system, they have some sort of advantage gained by being a part of the system, even if they might not agree with it. And that includes Black people, right? There are a lot of Black characters in this book who have very difficult relationships either with the justice system or with the school, and they either work at the school or contribute to the school in some way. And I think that made for such a really rich story. And at the same time, we also have an antagonist who is just straight up evil. I think that especially in this sort of historical context where you're talking about the things that people really did to hurt, traumatize, abuse, kill, dehumanize, and belittle people in history, you don't necessarily need to make them that complicated or give them redeeming qualities. You can and sometimes have to write them as evil. I love me a mixed, morally gray villain. I love me an antagonist who is complicated and may seem justified, but I don't think that's the type of antagonist that would have been appropriate for this story. So I personally really like the way that Tananarive handled the different types of antagonizing forces or complicit characters in this book. So if you're someone who enjoys stories like Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark, where the horror is integrated into an aspect of history, so like historical horror, then you might really enjoy this. Much like Ring Shout, we're looking at the history of racism and racism in the United States and injecting a supernatural element into that story. And I think that just like Ring Shout, it was done really well. So if you're looking for historical horror with a lot of heart, I would absolutely recommend The Reformatory. Alright, spoiler section here on out. I was so relieved with the ending. I was so deeply afraid that Gloria and Robbie weren't going to be able to reunite, or that something was going to happen, or just I was ready for many bad things to happen, including Miss Lottie just keeling over at the wheel, because man, that lady didn't seem like she was gonna make it. But the two of them are able to run away. Robbie escapes from the reformatory, and in the process he is able to work with Blue and the other Hates to kill the frickin' warden, and I'm just so happy because that man, disgusting, repulsive. He's the type of human being that is scary because I know that man existed in history, and definitely he exists today. Knowing that some of the most disgusting people portrayed in these books, the antagonists, the villains, are people that I might run into in the supermarket or just like on the train, and that's actually scary. So I was so glad when he died. I have absolutely no sympathy for him, no remorse. Kids, you did great. I'm so proud of you. After Robbie escapes, Gloria and Robbie are able to go to Chicago, and they end up reuniting with their dad, which was just, I wasn't expecting a happy ending from this book for how dark and horrific it was, and how many children didn't get a happy ending. So I guess Tananarive threw us a bone, and I was so upset with her for what she did to Redbone, so I deserved a happy ending. I'll end the spoiler section there and just say apologies to Tananarive Due. I feel like I'm rushing through this. I'm just so uncomfortable, and it is very difficult for me to breathe and talk at the same time. So I'm like getting lightheaded as I'm trying to do this review. So I will try to do her justice when I do the monthly wrap up. But for now, I will say that I love this book. I had a very difficult time reading it, and it got me emotional on multiple points. I was rooting for the characters. I was yelling at the characters. incredible book. I would give it a hearty 4 stars. This was, I think, a really successful reading vlog. I loved both of these horror books. I think they had similar strengths in that they both pulled from moments of racial violence and racial horror in US history and world history, I guess, with COVID, and we're able to integrate elements of the supernatural to tell a really poignant story that focuses the reader on those real world horrors while still keeping us entertained with the supernatural parts of it. Both of these books had me upset for similar reasons. At certain points, you will know if you've seen the spoiler sections of both of these books. But I just had a great time. Both of them were 4 stars. I love them, would highly recommend them if you enjoy horror, if you enjoy the supernatural, if you enjoy commentary on racism told through horror stories. I want to take a bit of a left turn and just take a moment at the end of this video to give you some of my thoughts on BookCon, both my experience, and I just want to comment on some of the discourse that's been going on post-con. I can't remember if I already said this at the intro or in another part of this vlog, but I didn't actually intend to go to BookCon, but my friend bought me tickets and she gifted them to me, so I ended up going, and I didn't learn about some of the glaring issues with the parent company until I had already accepted the tickets and agreed to go. I'll start with my actual personal experience being at BookCon. I think that it was pretty poorly organized, from the ticketing experience to the panel signing reservations. All of that was handled, I think, with a lot less elegance than they could have, and being there, it was a bit of a mess. The lines were not well regulated. The ADA accommodations also weren't well regulated. I think that honestly, just in terms of organization and logistics, they didn't do a great job. I think they could have done with more diversity in terms of the genres that were being shown at the panels, and just in general, there was a lot of romantasy. There was a lot of romance and fantasy, and I love fantasy, right? But it felt almost like Romantasy-Con with just a couple other things snuck in there. But I saw almost nothing for nonfiction. I didn't see a whole lot for literary fiction. I might be wrong, but I think I saw almost no panels for poetry. There could have been more panels on genres, like I said, nonfiction or poetry, more panels or events uplifting or highlighting authors and readers from marginalized communities. I didn't even try for any of the art drops, but I heard that those got kind of crazy. I heard that there were people putting hands on other people to get to the arcs, and that's just wild. If that was you, you should be embarrassed. What are you doing putting your hands on other people for free books? You are so lucky that I was not there. If someone put their hands on me to get to a book. Now, all that said, I had a great time. I went there with a group of friends, and while I did have a couple signings I wanted to attend, and there were some really cool panels that I did want to go to, most of them were, again, the ones that were about marginalized authors. I went to a queer horror panel. I went to an indigenous authors panel. I went to a YA or young adult, new adult fiction panel, and it was stacked. It was just a panel of Black women excellence. We had Jordan Ifueko, we had Annalee, we had Tracy Dion, just incredible. You'll have seen it in the footage, but my friends and I just kind of bopped around. We went to some panels, we shopped, we went to the ball, and had a good time. I think especially because we had low expectations for getting certain things, and so we weren't that stressed about what was going on. I've seen bigger content creators say that it was a great time for them to be able to meet with mutuals or to meet with some of their followers, and obviously I just started this channel. It's not like I would have really had anyone to meet, but if that had been something, I probably would have also enjoyed that. But yeah, overall, I personally had a really good time. But would I go back? Will I go back? I think one of the biggest controversies with BookCon has to do with the parent company of ReadPop. So if you aren't part of this conversation, if you haven't heard about this controversy, then I'll just give a quick summary. So BookCon is organized and run by a company called ReadPop, and ReadPop is responsible for some of the biggest cons like New York Comic Con. Now, ReadPop came under fire in 2026 because they are owned by the same parent company as LexisNexis, right? So we have parent company Real Lex or something like that, and then we have LexisNexis and ReadPop. ReadPop is the company, again, that organizes cons like BookCon and New York Comic Con, and LexisNexis is a data analytics firm, and they give data to organizations like ICE. Huge problem. Obviously very, very problematic, and people were starting to wonder how much cross-platform work is being done with ReadPop and and LexisNexis, like, are people who are going to Repop conventions getting their information and data sold to LexisNexis, like, what's going on? People had a lot of questions, etc., etc. Anyone in the comments who knows better about this can feel free to educate me, because I only know what I've Googled and heard from other people. But from what I'm understanding, Repop and LexisNexis are not collaborators. They are both sister companies that are owned by the same parent company, but Repop is operating independently of LexisNexis, or so they say. Now, this is something I definitely want to keep an eye on, because on one hand, I enjoyed being able to go to BookCon to support the authors that are marginalized, to support authors who are from communities that are being targeted by groups like ICE. And I thought that that was a really powerful thing to be able to do, to be able to go and speak to these authors. I met this one author in the alley, and we're talking about reading as resistance, and to be able to make those connections, I think, was really wonderful. But I don't want to be supporting a con or organization that is A, very poorly organized, and B, potentially working with an organization that is selling people's data to ICE. I don't have all the answers. This isn't a research video. This isn't an info video on that at all, but I just want to say that I'll be keeping my eye on that situation. And next year, if BookCon comes around and they host it again, I'll definitely be plugged into that conversation to see if it's something I even want to attend again. LexisNexis seems like one of those entities that's kind of like Kellogg's or Disney, that's just kind of impossible at this point to avoid completely. If you've worked in an office, if you've gone to any sort of bureaucratic office and given your name or address, LexisNexis has probably had their hands on that information, and you've already unknowingly been supporting them. But the difference for me is choice, right? Because I can't choose if an office that I am going to is working with LexisNexis and I don't know about it. That's not something that I have a lot of agency in, but I can choose whether or not I give my money to BookCon if it comes to light that they, Repop, are actually working with LexisNexis. Sure, me choosing not to go to New York Comic Con or BookCon is not going to bring down LexisNexis, right? It's not going to destroy ICE. But if it is something that I have some agency in and I could choose not to put my money towards, that's something that I definitely take seriously. I could try and summarize my congested brain fog ramble about BookCon and say that I had a great time despite all the issues I had with the logistics and the running of the event. But I'll definitely be keeping my eye on the situation / conversation going around in terms of Repop and LexisNexis. It is, I think, a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think that if all of the readers who are anti-racist, who are anti-ICE, who are politically aware, if they all chose not to go to BookCon, then the number of people who are going to support authors of color, authors from marginalized communities, that will probably be a much smaller group going to support those people. And so on one hand, I want to make sure that we show up for those authors and those communities, but on the other hand, I want to be smart about where I'm putting my money, and the world is a nightmare and it is impossible to get everything right. But yeah, it is just on my mind, and it is something that I will be keeping on my mind and thinking about for the future. I don't know if any of the footage from me sitting here right now is even going to be usable. I have truly just been rambling and trying not to get lightheaded, so we will see. Either way, thank you so much for watching the second vlog from April. I'm pretty sure that this is going to end up getting released at the very beginning of May. If you have any recommendations for other horror that you think that I would enjoy, please let me know. Obviously, I enjoy sort of historical horror, I enjoy supernatural horror, I enjoy horror that has heart to it, so leave any recommendations in the comments below. Alright, I'm gonna go blow my nose and maybe take some Sudafed. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Okay. If you're into horror and you're not afraid of a little bit of blur and gore, if you're not afraid of a little bit of blood and gore, I think that so far the horror aspects are being done really